you hear me? You can't hear. Now you can hear me. First of all, I think Arnold did an excellent talk and he deserves another round of applause, right? Because this was a really, really great talk. Second of all, I'm perfectly aware that I'm probably the last thing standing between you and your lunch. So you might be a little bit conflicted about whether you want to be here. So let me start with something different than the introduction that will come later. I would like to ask you a question. Do you think that your personal interests, your personal best interests are in line with your organization best interest? How many of you are in the state of the conflict of interest? Okay, a few persons, so I think this will be an interesting talk because my goal is to make you a little bit uncomfortable and I will be discussing things which are rarely discussed and verbalized in public. They usually happen behind the curtains and people don't talk about them. Right, so let's start with a use case. Imagine that you are a person responsible for a relationship with a customer. The customer is a big petrol network chain. They have thousands of petrol stations. They have customers approaching approximately to 1 million. Things are working rather well. You are responsible for technology and the relationship with them. Then one Monday you show up on your job and you see this kind of a notification. I will give you a second to read it. Something's wrong with the new model. We need to define a new one. It's urgent. Not sure how you think about it, but it doesn't sound very nice. And there's a couple of things which may happen. And unfortunately, because I will still call myself a technical person because I graduated computer science, spent in the industry 10 years before shifting to the consulting space. People in technology like to have things black and white, ones and zeros, and relatively clear. So when the customer says we should talk about the operating model, that means that we should talk about the operating model. So we take this easy route. We agree for a meeting with the customer. We try to diagnose what is the problem. The customer is telling us roughly. So we had a failure, a massive failure of our loyalty programs. A lot of customers should receive a discount on fuel, but they didn't. And they called our support line, and your IT department, level 3, didn't manage to correct all of the discounts in time. 80% went over the agreed SLA, so which basically means you are in deep trouble, right? So what do? You agree to a new operating model. Perhaps you do some investment in, let's say, artificial intelligence. You hire more people in, let's say, less expensive locations. You make sure that people are on the standby calls so you can bring them to job when needed. And what happens after some time? You lose the customer, despite doing seemingly everything right? And I have seen this case playing out times and times again, and you can check up which company I work for. So we have learned how to prevent it. What is going on? Now I can feel you are listening to me. First of all, if you are implementing any sort of the optimization to how customers are handling their support tickets, you are increasing two things. First of all, costs and complexity of your solution, which means that over the long time, it will be more difficult to maintain the quality and SLA, right? This stuff is going to get worse over time. But there is another issue. By moving to the diagnose the problem part, you have accepted that you are the problem. Right? And the moment you go to that call with the customer and you discuss what is wrong with the target operating model, you have lost all of the opportunities to actually help customer organization operate better. It doesn't matter which numbers do you use, it doesn't matter which metrics do you use, the game is over. Why? We tend to call that sort of the IT organization and the customer providers. Why? Because those are the people who are usually working for large organizations in a very stressful roles. They are stretched very thin. They, at best, negotiate their budget. Most of the time, they get the budget assigned, and they have to deliver everything what the organization needs. They receive specifications. They don't participate in solution development. They just need to do whatever business is asking them. They are seen as a cost center. By the way, does any one of you considers yourself as working for a cost center? Oh, a few, okay, but let's say you are seen as a cost center, and a rather expensive one because you know IT people working in the IT aren't exactly the most affordable workers, and you are being blamed for everything which goes wrong. Right? As simple as that. And primary expectations, which is the source why customers are leaving, is because they are expected to cut costs. If you can't argue and demonstrate what value are you bringing to the organization, you are a cost, and if you are a cost, you need to optimize how you are working. And if you are optimizing how you are working, you are taking tail risks, which means that sooner or later they will fire back and you will find yourself in an even worse situation. As a part of our research function, we have actually described this dynamics of a corporate IT, right? This is how tech debt is being built. This is how organizations are getting slow to respond. And if you are working for a central organization in the IT, for a central IT function in an organization, what usually happens, people throw a lot of work at you. You have no say in terms of what this work is. So you are getting thin maintaining that, you are slow to respond, and then they go and complain, to the CEO, this IT organization is no good, we have to procure stuff outside using external consultancy. They do it, and what happens with that stuff? It gets dropped on the IT, right? And this spirals down until the IT breaks down. Where I wanted to get you is that the moment you receive an email which talks about the price, inefficiency, or any other stuff, all of the red alerts should go in because probably you are being blamed, played, or whatever word you use, you are at a conflict of interest and you need to be very careful about what you do next. In this particular situation, what really happened in terms of this customer failure, I wanted to show you like this. We assumed that there was an event, possibly more than one, which bent the KPIs. Somebody was on the hook, right? If there is a massive problem in the company, somebody will be blamed. What happened next? There was an internal analysis of what happened and why. There was the assignment of the blame, and there was an expectation of the solution. It's a pretty straightforward process. IT is not present in this one. IT is usually present in this one, right? So that's like to be consistent with everything which I have been saying about. So we started asking questions about, okay, so what really happened? Loyalty program failure? Yes, they've told us that. The reality, wrong coupons issues? Yes, they told us that. IT needed a lot of time to fix problems? Yes, that was true. Everyone tried as hard as they could. IT didn't deliver because everything else was working well. Make IT work better. Roughly, right? So this is the 5 whys approach. So you basically are probing the reality until you get to something meaningful. Now, I will share with you a very dirty trick and a very simple one. So how we tend to solve this type of issues is basically we close people in one room and we make them talk. Usually it's in a form of workshop. That's all what is needed. Usually there is a dinner involved, some beverages with percentages, and people get usually honest and we can say what is going on. So what turned out to be in this situation is that there were issues with the data pipeline. What actually happened was that each station manager had to close the day to send the data for processing and issuing coupons. But if the day was particularly busy or the manager was short-staffed, they tended to close the station on the next day, which means that the data missed the coupon calculation. As simple as that, right? Actually, when we were analyzing the data pipeline, it turned out that they had approximately 24 of reasons why coupons were issued in the wrong way. Right? As simple as that. Nobody really cared about diagnosing the data pipeline. They assumed the blame was on the IT space. The worst part, people responsible for the data pipeline, they have basically planned the entire monitoring project. But it never got a green light to be executed. Why? Because everyone was comfortable. Everyone could blame IT for their failures, first of all. And second of all, the person responsible for that, the CEO, couldn't get past a particular story. If you do your job right, monitoring will not be necessary. Now, this is, I mean, it creates some laughs, but this is actually a very interesting aspect which people in the IT space need to learn how to play with, because there is an objective reality and there are words describing it. The objective reality is hidden, and it depends on your ability to verbalize things. How can you shape the situation and what options are available to you? In this case, for this CIO, the monitoring project was off the table. We helped the CIO craft another story, extremely simple, and I feel almost like ashamed for saying it loudly. But we said something like, the assumption is that failures will happen and we need to know why. Simple, trivial. I don't want to say brilliant, that wouldn't be appropriate, but the thing is that what it did and why it was difficult for the CIO to accept was that the CIO had to say that he's not perfect. And many people have problem with that. Failures will happen, we need to know why. But there was another issue. Why was the coupon calculation time earlier than the data cutoff time? First of all, lack of the diagnostic tool, we have already talked about that. But the second one is lack of the understanding how the organization works. Where does petrol stations earn their money? On fuel? No, on additional stuff, right? And what we did by closing people in one room and making them talk, how do they deliver value? How their organization deliver value, and what is the relationship between those two? They have told us that, there is actually 7 layers of management between people responsible for data pipeline and people responsible for coupons. How can this work, right? And again, this is stuff which cannot be fixed by metrics. It requires almost like a certain mindset or human approach to understand that you are in a wrong spot, you are not set up for anything meaningful, you are being told what to do, expected to do more, but regardless of what you do, you will end up in a really poor place. That's why I have asked you at the beginning whether you are at a conflict of interest with your organization or not. Because, believe me or not, all of you are in the conflict of interest with your organization, or if not with the entire organization, that at least with other people running different departments in that organization. And if you don't accept that this is first of all going on and then managing it almost like explicitly, knowing what is fine, what is not, then, well, work can get difficult. Solutions happened on 2 levels. One was the simple one, green light the pipeline monitoring. Because if you do that, then everyone knows why the coupons are failing and what needs to be fixed, and you can derive all sorts of metrics, right? Petrol station closed on the wrong time, that has a cost. Something else according to the specification but not implemented, it has a cost. You can make conscious decision. But the more interesting thing was on the right-hand side, which is coaching the leaders and teaching them how to refuse the blame assigning narratives. So basically, when something is not working in your organization, or you feel that something is not working in your organization, you should try to get to the source of the problem and not accept what other people are saying. Remember, they are in the conflict of interest too. And it will become a little bit more visible in the next two slides where I have a slightly different use cases. The interesting part is that if you learn how to bypass management hierarchy and people start reaching out to different parts of the organization, the entire organization starts getting aligned because people talk to each other. And now I will say something controversial. This is very hard to do in the remote environment. It requires people getting together, and as I had a pleasure to talk with some of you before this presentation. So this was like the main reason to go to the office to talk to the other people. This stuff requires almost like partying with other people and getting them to know really well so that you can talk about really difficult stuff. I'm mindful of time, I will be speaking a little bit fast. Another use case that we've got is an insurance organization which wanted to build a new customer portal. That was the project they had on the list. The problem was that approximately half the organization wanted to do it, the other half didn't want to do it. And they've spent 6 months trying to figure out what is the situation, whether they should do it, and how should they do it. What it turned out, they had 2 lines, consumer line and business line. Consumer line was earning quite a lot of money, business line was not. Business line was actually at a huge risk of not meeting their KPIs. If you would be responsible for business line, would you like to build a new customer portal or participate in the costs? I don't think so, right? It's not in your interest. So the solution in that, again, think about the situation. If it feels wrong, it is because probably something isn't being said. And in this particular case, individual KPIs or the reasons why people responsible for those lines could get bonuses weren't discussed publicly. Yeah, I can see a few nods, but essentially this is it. If you've got your KPIs which you are not showing to the entire organization related to your bonus, you will optimize for those, but everyone else, or if there are conflicts in KPIs, that will end up in a conflict in the company without really knowing why. Another case study, basically another, let's say, investment company which tried to replace a lot of interns with an AI solution. By the way, do you think it does make sense doing something like that? No. Also, in this case, it did. But they spent approximately, again, a year trying to argue whether it makes sense or not, with all sorts of data, proof of concept, and stuff like that. And what we have discovered is that they had a conflict between financial and IT department. And basically, in their organization, the size of the department meant status and budget, and how much you could decide about where the company should go. Which means it wasn't a conflict about whether to replace interns with the AI solution, it was rather a conflict about which team is bigger and who decides about where the company goes, right? Again, sounds obvious when you are looking at it from the outside. From the inside, it just feels like a conflict, right? It's just they are being difficult. And by the way, the conflict was settled by a marketing team, a total third party not participating in the conflict, who said that they want a vendor with a trusted logo, which means that you are replacing interns with a solution but bought from a, let's say, respected partner. Why? Because it builds reputation. That was end of the story. Again, being stuck in the conflict, trying to do technology supported by whatever metrics didn't answer or didn't help the organization. It was actually trying to understand the big situation, which was more beneficial. And where I'm heading with it? I'm heading with it to the point that the holy grail of IT is being a partner in collaboration with business. And that means that you need to have at least basic understanding of how marketing works, how business operations works, how do you manage costs, and stuff like that. Many of you don't like it. I didn't like it definitely when I started this adventure. It was very painful for me to learn that stuff. Even the language which business uses is slightly different. And only if you have this basic understanding of how business operates, you can start talking with them about how IT can help them build value instead of what services do you need to provide for them. Building value generates value for the company. Providing services generates costs. And this is a massive switch in the perspective and your chances for success in the organization. So what is happening? You are going, if you try to embrace that, you will be going from being a provider to being a partner, and partners, they have slightly different responsibilities, or perhaps slightly different characteristics. The most important one is being transparency and taking responsibility. You still may be blamed for doing things wrong, but in this case, it will be because of the risks that you have chosen and not that were assigned to you. The recipe for improvement, and this is perhaps the most difficult part of this presentation, is first of all, spot the struggle. We are humans, we don't like getting uncomfortable. And if we don't like getting uncomfortable, when we see struggle, we tend to move in some other direction. I don't want to be a part of that. What I'm trying to say that if you see a struggle, if you see a situation where things aren't working out, this is precisely the spot in which you should get engaged. Give or take the position of the company and your position in the company, because if you engage in a wrong conflict, you will get fired pretty fast. You need to understand how value is created, and it goes beyond technology. Actually, technology doesn't matter in this case. What matters is what consumers are paying for. And seek to understand people's motivation. At the beginning, I have mentioned you are in the conflict of interest, your peers are in the conflict of interest. So unless you understand what motivates people in your room or in your division, you can't really talk about the previous points or spot the struggle or try to propose any solution that will work. Because sometimes people are working for a company, but they are thinking about their personal lives or personal situation and try to optimize for that. Sometimes they have a reason, sometimes they don't. One more thing, be slow to judge, because if you judge people for their conflict of interest, for their reality and how they're navigating it, they will try to protect their image. And if they will protect their image, you will not be able to understand what is the real problem. You will have to guess, which is always a problem. And finally, it's almost like a repetition of the first point, focus on tensions. And tensions aren't spotted in metrics. Tensions is something that you feel when you enter the room. Tension is something that you feel when you read an email. And if you feel strongly about a particular situation, this doesn't mean that you have to act on it, but it does mean that you perhaps could spend a little bit more time trying to understand what do you really feel and why. Sometimes it might be because of the chance of something being your opportunity. Sometimes it might be because this is your personal experience, trauma, or something like that. And sometimes because there is a real challenge or a real problem going on within the organization in which you could solve. And with that, I have 20 seconds for questions and answers. No 20 seconds. Okay, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience.
Yes.